Efendim Symantec Vice President'ı çok kıymetli bir isim. Kim yani efendim? Darren Thomson beyefendi değil mi? Darren Thomson sizin kuvvetli alkışlarınızla buraya geliyor.
It's so nice to have you, my
Good to see you.
Hi Darren.
Hello, good to see you.
Welcome. Nice to meet you.
Stage is yours.
Buyurunuz.
Okay, well, good afternoon. I have no idea what they just said, so I'm going to assume it was funny and they were complimentary about me. My name's Darren Thomson. I'm from Symantec. I'm Symantec's Chief Technology Officer for Europe, Middle East and Africa. I thought I'd spend a little bit of time with you this afternoon talking about the future. At Symantec, we believe, and I certainly believe, that the security industry is an industry that has been incrementally innovating for the past 20 years. We've seen innovation in security. Our competitors in our marketplace push us forward. The criminal community challenge us every day, and we push our technologies forward. But we've seen incremental innovation in security. When we consider what's going on in the world right now, how we're living our lives, how our children are living their lives and will live their working lives once they leave their education, what we're seeing is every aspect of our lives, whether it be our work lives, our family lives, the way we play, our leisure time, every aspect of our lives is being transformed. And as a technologist, I find that enormously exciting. I'm excited about the sorts of things that we're doing with technology. And in my capacity as CTO, I'm very lucky to work with all of the various vertical markets that you can see on the screen here. And all of them are doing the same thing. They are racing to digitize. They are racing to connect. They are racing to connect their products and their consumers and to drive analytic capability to transform their businesses digitally. And although all of this is tremendously exciting, the security strategist in me is concerned. And I'm concerned because I feel that the pace of change that we're seeing across these vertical markets, the digital transformation pace, is outpacing, frankly, what we're doing in security. And if we leave that as it is, what we're going to see is every aspect of our lives transformed. We're going to see cities online. We're going to see automated railway networks, driverless vehicles, all of the things that we hear about in the news. Those are going to emerge, and there are going to be some very, very serious unintended consequences because security did not keep up. So what I want to talk to you about for the next 20 minutes or so are three areas where at Symantec we're already experiencing a transformation. We're already starting to experience radical innovation. And I'm going to talk to you about those three areas. Those three areas are, first of all, psychology and the area of social science. And really the coming together of social science and IT science that allows us to understand more about people and to understand more about how to leverage those people to help protect ourselves. So psychology and social science. The second area we're going to talk about is the continuation and radical information explosion around analytics. And I'm going to give you some real-world examples about some very, very exciting innovations in that area. And then we're going to finish by talking about the state of the industry. My prediction to you today is that in the next 5 years, you are going to see a massive consolidation in the security industry in the same way that you saw consolidation in other software industries, such as ERP. There are currently, by most estimations, around 2,500 software security companies on the planet today. About 7 of them are profitable. Just think about that. Where are you placing your bets? Who are you going to lean on? Who are you going to rely on in the next decade to protect your businesses? We are going to see consolidation of this market. And that consolidation, in the same way that it did in ERP, is going to drive a new architectural discipline around platforms. So platforms are the third thing that I want to talk about today. Let's start with social science, though. The law of unintended consequences is a well-documented piece of group psychology and social science that talks about the following things. The idea of a manifest function. A manifest function is something that we planned to happen. We're very, very good at this in IT. Very good. As engineers, we are trained to think this way. This is what project management is about. We have a goal, we're going to decide how we're going to reach that goal with steps along the way, and eventually we're going to reach our goal. We're good at this in IT. What we're not so good at in IT are these things. Latent functions. These are the things we didn't see coming. And the reason we're not very good at this in IT is because this is normally to do not with technology, but to do with people. We fail to predict how people are going to react to the things that we create. And we're already starting to see some evidence of this emerging as we push on this road to digitization. So here's a driverless car. This is Google's driverless car. What are the intended consequences of the driverless vehicle? Well, the intended consequences are, by most estimates, in the region of a 95% reduction in road fatalities. That's why we're doing driverless cars. That's why we're pushing that innovation. That's why we want it to happen. And that's a great intended consequence. We can save lives. When we think about some of the unintended consequences, though, just within the sphere of security, we're already starting to see some of the problems and vulnerabilities and therefore unintended consequences of the driverless vehicle. But I'm not going to talk to you now about the technical vulnerabilities here. Let's think about a different type of unintended consequence. I predict that people are going to get angry. People are going to get angry with these things. Google happened to be based next door to Symantec in Silicon Valley. I see their car going round and round the streets whenever I'm in Mountain View. Let me tell you something about driverless vehicles. They're boring. They're boring. They're like the most boring driver you've ever seen in your life. They stop at every single junction. They never exceed a speed limit. They never run an amber light. They're incredibly safe and boring. So what happens when we mix those devices with us? I predict antisocial behavior. There's an unintended consequence that maybe you hadn't thought about when it comes to driverless vehicles. And I think in security, we need to be thinking this way a lot more. I'm in project meetings all of the time, all over Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and I'm listening to the manifest function. I'm listening to, we'd like to achieve this with technology. And the psychologist in me is thinking, yeah, but is that a good idea? Is that even legal? Is it moral? How are people going to react? How are people going to react? Let me tell you something else about social science. One of the categories of social science is criminology. In case nobody had noticed, that's what we're doing. We're trying to combat cyber criminals. They are people. And in my view, this industry is way too focused on technology and not focused enough on people, the motivations, the techniques, the backgrounds, the context to the attacks that we're trying to defend ourselves against. So I want everybody to think a little bit about, in your own businesses, with the own innovations going on, the things that you're creating and connecting, what does the skills mix look like in your environment? How are you assessing both intended and unintended consequences? And think about the following phrase: could we versus should we? Is everything we're trying to create really a good idea? Really? And to get to the answer to those sorts of questions, you need to fill the project room full of technologists, yes, process experts, business experts, and social scientists. You do not get the complete picture unless you include the human. So let's talk a little bit about analytics and data. We've already heard a lot from the industry security and other industries about the importance of data and analytics. Let me tell you where I think this is going to go. I'm going to use this example to illustrate my point. Anybody in the room familiar with Fold It? Anybody seen this before? Okay, so a word of warning, this is a potential denial of weekend attack. This is a game. You can download this on your iPhones and on your Android devices. And it's essentially a puzzle game. Very addictive. It's also based on a social media platform, so there are league tables and players compete with one another to complete these three-dimensional puzzles. What's interesting about Fold It, though, is that what's actually going on here is clinical biology. In solving the puzzles in the game, the players in the game are actually doing something that in biology is called protein folding. And it just so happens that protein folding is an incredibly important technique in the battle against the HIV virus, Ebola, and other massive epidemics that we see in the world today. And these are peer-reviewed medical journals that are talking about the benefits of the data that's being generated by the Fold It game. So what do we have here? We have non-expert users, the players of the game. These people are not biologists or chemists. They're non-expert users. We multiply them. We have lots of them, tens of thousands of users. We add an analytic of some description to that, and as a result, we reduce risk. I think this equation is going to be fundamental in terms of the future of cybersecurity and the innovations we're going to see within it. Let me give you some examples as to some of the things that we're doing in our research labs at Symantec that leverage exactly this model. The first one I call the diseconomies of scale in security. When we add an employee to our business, when we bring somebody into the business, as security specialists, we see that as risk. That's a new person. They're an unknown quantity. They're going to be carrying 3 or 4 new devices. They're going to need access to data. They're going to need access to systems. They carry more risk. So every time we add somebody to the workforce, we bring more risk into the organization. Well, what could we do, perhaps, to reverse that logic? What could we do to make the most of the people in our organization, even the non-expert people? I think you'd all agree with me that previously, over the last 10 years, education of those people, trying to teach these people, non-experts, to be security experts, has failed. Just not worked. We should continue to do empowerment and education. We should definitely do that. But let's stop kidding ourselves that that's fundamentally going to change the risk landscape. It's not. When my mother is on her laptop shopping on Amazon, she doesn't care about security. It doesn't matter how many pop-ups I throw her way, she's still not going to care. So we've got to help our users. But what can we do to leverage the population of users that we have in our business? Well, at Symantec, we're doing a trial right now which uses this concept of using plain English, talking to non-experts about security issues. So what if you were to receive this message on your phone? It appears that you're encrypting your backup storage. Yes or no? You are or you're not? Now, if you don't know what encrypted backups are, the answer's no. You're not doing it, right? Now, it just so happens that if we get answers to this question at scale, and we produce an analytic as a result of that, this is an indicator of compromise for a ransomware attack. When a cyber criminal conducts a ransomware attack, very, very often, first of all, sometimes a week before or even a month before, they will encrypt as many backups as they can in the organization. So that once they've actually executed the ransomware attack, the users cannot go back to their backups. So, if 10,000 users answer to the affirmative here, no, we did not kick off an encrypted backup, but we're seeing one, that's probably an indicator of compromise. We've just used the equation that I gave you earlier. Non-expert users at scale with an analytic telling us something about our risk landscape. And we could apply this to all kinds of different things. You're sending earnings information before the date that you're supposed to. Are you doing it or aren't you? There's any amount of things that we can rely on here. We haven't educated our users in terms of security. We're not expecting them to be experts. They're just answering basic questions. And that leads us to conclusions and helps us to find indicators of compromise. This equation, by the way, could also be used for things as well as people. I'm going to talk about IoT in just a second. This is a phrase that I hear a lot at conferences like this. The user is the weakest link. You know, I kind of have a problem with that. And the reason I have a problem with that is because if that's true, then that's my fault. That's the security industry's fault. That's not the user's fault. They were never trained to be a security person. They didn't join the organization to think about security, and now we're expecting them to act in relevant ways when it comes to risk. And make no mistake, we're at a point in history where we're expecting our non-expert users to make more digital risk decisions than any time in history. Every time they open an email, every time they look at an attachment, every time they go to a website, they are needing to assess risk. Again, when my mother, a non-expert IT user, sees something like this, why wouldn't she go to goldmine.com/win? That sounds like a great place to go. Why wouldn't I go there? She has to make a risk decision. I want everybody in the audience to look at this picture. How do you feel about walking down this street? This is where I live in the UK. It doesn't always look like this. It's not always sunny. It's not sunny now. How do you feel about walking down that street? Feel pretty good about that? Yeah? What about this one? Not so good, right? Not so good. What just happened there is thousands of psychological triggers, impulses in your brains led you to a risk decision. And most of you probably made a good risk decision based on that input. And that input, by the way, is just a still two-dimensional photograph. In your lives, this is happening all of the time in 3 dimensions. And the best we can do in IT for our users in terms of those psychological triggers is this. We expect our users to make good risk decisions based on input like this. Again, if this is in the way of my mother's Christmas shopping on Amazon, she's just going to click go. Just get rid of this. I need to get to Amazon. I need to do my shopping. Don't care. So what could we do about that? Well, again, at Symantec in our research labs, we're looking at nudge theory. This, again, is a psychological principle, very well documented in social sciences, that talks about how we can help people to move towards a good decision. And we already see examples of this, basic examples. A password strength meter would be a really good example of this, right? What's interesting at Symantec is we have a team of psychologists that are working on the following idea. What if, given that we know a lot about the threat landscape around organizations and their users, what if we could manipulate the user's experience, the user's interface, to help them towards a good decision? This is not the same as a pop-up. It's not something that needs to make sense to the user, but are there things that we could manipulate subtly to move people towards maybe not opening that email attachment instead of opening? Maybe not going to that website instead of going to it. What I'm very, very happy to report and somewhat excited about is our teams in research labs have got to a point now where not only can they increase the risk-taking ability of employees by manipulating user interfaces, but they can do it without the user noticing. The user doesn't quite know why they didn't open the attachment. They just decided not to because they were being manipulated psychologically. Now, that's exciting from a security perspective. That potentially helps us with the user being the weakest link. I would return you to one of my first points, though, which is unintended consequences. Imagine this in the hands of a cybercriminal. Now I'm manipulating people to do bad things. We always have to think about the unintended consequence. Let's talk a little bit about IT. If I go back to my equation, non-expert users at scale with an analytic help us to reduce risk. We can do this with things as well. And IoT is just a bunch of things. One of the things that we're working on at Symantec is this idea of almost a nutrition label for devices. So if we're talking about a CCTV camera or a fridge or a laptop or a toaster or a dog's collar or a Fitband or whatever it might be, that device will have a fingerprint. It will have characteristics that we can assess and analyze. Things like, does it have a default password? Can that password be changed? Things like, how much heat should it be generating? What are its inputs and outputs typically? What should it be doing? What's interesting about this, if you apply my equation to it, is we can scale this up to tens and millions of devices, and we can start to do anomaly detection. So now we can say, well, there's 500,000 fridges, and they're acting weirdly. They're doing something that is out of the norm. Their behavior is not normal. That is an indicator of compromise, probably in the fridge's case, for a botnet. We can get ahead of this game. A couple of other examples to give you, applying these kinds of principles. AI in the SOC. There was a great panel earlier on the Security Operations Center. Let me share you some interesting research and actual work that's been done at Symantec to leverage some of these principles in analytics. So you're all aware of the fact that this is the problem in the SOC. Thousands of incidents, log files, alerts, too many of which for the humans to deal with. We have a skills shortage, there aren't enough people, and the people that we have are exhausted looking at this various data. So at Symantec, what we did is about 3 years ago, we implemented a supervised machine learning routine, which allowed our analysts to tell a machine learning algorithm what was good and what was bad. I've assessed this, it's a good file. I've assessed this, it's a bad file. We did this for nearly 2 years. As a result of that, you can see some of the results. We managed then to properly suppress about 66% of the alerts that we were seeing. The analysts were not doing anything different in their everyday duties. They were just looking at the right things based on what the machine learning algorithm was telling them. We've now taken this a step further using that analytic and implementing proper AI, actually, and correlated machine learning. We've now doubled the resolved incident rates in the Symantec SOC. Now, to give you some sense of scale, we have about 800 analysts at Symantec looking after Symantec. We have a huge SOC operation. So when you're talking about doubling the efficiency of those analysts, that really matters. I hear a lot about machine learning and AI as I travel around the world and come to these conferences. This is machine learning and AI doing something for real, having a real, tangible impact on the way that business operates. What it could lead us to, of course, is this idea of a synthetic analyst. We now have all of this data. We know what all those trillions of files, good and bad, are. One of the problems that we've always had at Symantec is taking our managed security service to small businesses. And the reason we've struggled there is because there are people behind it. It's expensive for us to run that service. We're now at a point where we believe we can stand up a synthetic analyst, which is essentially an AI chat box. So as a small business, you could ask this thing questions, it will give you answers, it will feel like the best SOC analyst you've ever met. In actual fact, it's a robot. Okay. Here's my vision for the future. I want the incident, when we talk about incident response, I want the incident not to be something bad's happened, we've got to respond. I want the incident to be the mere possibility of a breach. And using some of the techniques that I've outlined for you today, we're moving very, very close to that reality. We're developing software now that can help us to answer some of the questions that you can see here. In the future, which of my machines is most likely to cause me a problem? Of my employees, who are the riskiest? If we look at my supply chain, where are the biggest likelihoods for vulnerabilities and attacks in my supply chain? This is a crystal ball in software. Imagine an incident response team not reacting to something bad, a breach, just reacting to some energy that is likely to lead to a breach. This is where we need to take security, and this is at Symantec what we mean when we talk about radical innovation. Thank you very much.